In today's video, I'm studying from Batman, the Black Mirror. So in previous videos, I explained that I like to do master studies, but I do my master studies a little bit differently. I don't do one-for-one replicas. I'm not trying to copy exactly. I'm basically experimenting with the essence of what the artist created. And this way, since I'm not trying to do an exact replica, it allows me to experiment, to think, to process, and create a way that makes sense to me for my own understanding. Now, I've never done a video like this before, so bear with me that the format is a little bit different. I took some pictures in the beginning because most of the times I'm drawing on my couch where the lighting isn't the best, the audio isn't the best, and I don't necessarily have a setup. But here in my art room, I can adjust the camera, adjust the lighting for the best possible visuals. So hopefully that makes sense why sometimes there's footage of me actually inking and then there's sometimes pictures being shown. Hopefully you learn as much as I did by watching me through my own process. Alright, first things first, I like to use a sketchbook for this. I start with kind of guessing how big I want my recreation to be. It's not a perfect measurement, but obviously I try to make it as close to a shrunken down version as I can. So in this part, literally it's just a page and it's just the panels that are going to be within the page. The next thing I do is try to look for the very big shapes that need to go down, going panel by panel and just roughing in the objects that need to be there. The third thing, once I have my general structure down, this is all in pencil at this very first part because I have tried drawing directly in ink and I find myself trying to be a perfectionist. And though some of those images do come out okay, I'm always overthinking it. But I decided for these studies, let us follow how I handle normal comics, which is you start with just a rough pencil. I did the rough pencils for all the panels and I started from big to small. And then once I pretty much got down all the things that I thought was necessary in each panel, then I came back with my ink and I wanted to get all the darks in, all those heavy shadows as much as I could. Now, I'll say this, I've probably said this before, but I don't use fancy tools for my inking. I use just whatever I happen to have around. Some of them are good quality, some of them are just things that I picked up from the dollar store. Because the purpose is not to make perfect recreations, the purpose is to learn some techniques that will hopefully translate into my digital work. So after I did the big details, then I started to go down to the medium-sized things and added in the textures of the panels. Trying to vary up the line weight, add the shadows, and keep the things that should be in the foreground and the things that should be in the background in the back. The very next step is doing the details. The artists for this book, Jock and Francesco Francavilla, they did a lot of little, I think David Finch likes to call it greeble, where it's just dirt, dander, the glass shards. So I went in and added fine detailing to all of that. And then the last thing I did was add in that rain effect as well as some of those background textures. Now, I don't know what kind of brush he used or they used in order to smudge, but I tried, like I had a dry brush, a dry marker that was definitely out of ink. What's funny is I bought it brand new and it was out of ink, but I tried to use that in order to recreate those smudging dry effects, but in the end I just did a hatching technique to blend it in. Now, I was really nervous about drawing the lines for the rain because I guess I didn't want it to not make sense, but I just used a ruler to go over and draw the rain and create the rain. as light as I possibly could. Things I learned from this particular image was how much detail or greeble I could add to a scene in order to make the scene come to life. I did choose to change some things. For instance, in the original artwork, in that very first panel, the woman has her hands like straight up, almost in like a T pose. But when you look at the image of her on the ground from having fallen, you'll find that she has one arm kind of tucked in, one arm outstretched. I'll say right here now, like, I don't know what kind of hand they drew on her. I had a hell of a time. At first, I tried to recreate the hand that they drew, but I didn't like how it came out, so I changed the hand entirely. And I think that's what's great about doing these studies, is that, yeah, you could create a one-for-one replica, but I think it's better if you find things that you don't like about how they handled it and you choose to make a different option, a different choice. And some of that is the choices are different because the sizings are different and how you understand things are different. And then sometimes it's just different because you actually choose to make a different choice. For instance, when I was inking her hair in the second and middle panel, her hair did not make sense to me as I was looking at the original art. And I've been learning in ArtWad about how to group things in clumps, to how to group hair strands. Don't think of it as these individual strands, but to think of it as pieces that work together. And so I actually used that technique to make sense of the hair to me. And I think that the effect was pretty good. Today is Sunday. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. I've been up since 6 working on other things, but this is the first day that I've actually been able to sit at my desk to do this master study. So I don't necessarily know how I'm gonna film this or record this, so this is kind of all experimental. The first master study that you saw, I did on my couch. That's usually after work. That's where I usually spend most of my time, just on my couch, inking, drawing, creating, while my wife plays video games. But when I have the quiet time in the morning, I will come to my art room and use my art desk, which is definitely a better situation for everybody, including myself. So today I'm going to work on at least half a page of this master study. I'm taking my time with it. It is shrunk down, so it goes a little bit faster. I don't like to do one-to-one copies or replicas. I feel like when I shrink things down, it takes off the pressure of everything having to be perfect, and it allows me to interpret the best way to recreate whatever I'm seeing on the page. Another thing that I like to do while I'm drawing specifically is listen to audiobooks or podcasts, or have a YouTube channel going on in the background. Something that just keeps my mind occupied while I focus in and zone in on what I'm creating. I don't know how long it's going to take me today. I don't usually time myself. I'm looking forward to spending a couple hours just focusing in on inking. Another thing I wanted to share with you guys real quick is I'm not using fancy tools. I'm using pens and markers that I have already around my house. Most of them I got from either Walmart or Family Dollar. Even though I would not recommend getting pens from Family Dollar, I actually got a pack that was dry, like completely unusable, so I consider that a donation to them. But their fine liners happen to work pretty good for the money, so don't think that you have to worry about what type of pens, what type of markers, what type of tools you have. It's not important how you create the art, what you use. What's important is that you're trying and you're studying and you're figuring it out. So even if it's the first time that you've ever done a master study, don't worry about having the best tools or the best of everything, because 9 9 times out of 10, that's not even gonna matter. Just find something that you can draw with, ink with, or if you're doing it digitally. I happen to enjoy doing traditional studies first because I can take my time with it and really understand. And I find that when I do things traditionally, it usually translates pretty well to digitally. Let's begin. I had a lot of fun drawing that first image, and it didn't take me as long as I thought. So on to the second image, I decided to do a double page spread of this situation of Officer Gordon entering this room. As always, I decide how big I want this study to be. So this way, for this one, I changed the orientation of my notebook and I put both pages next to each other. This one was a challenge within itself because of just how much black was used on the page, and that was something that I wasn't necessarily used to using. I wasn't necessarily comfortable with using, but I understood that the way they used it on the original artwork, it looked good, it had an impact, as well as there was a particular mood that made sense with the way they chose to use the shadows to frame certain panels. So once again, I started with pencil. I did all the rough images that I possibly could, starting with the bigger areas, and I started using like little X's in order to indicate what areas of the image would be black, so that way I wasn't penciling that in. I think I got that from David Finch's Proco drawing a comic page class. Like, if you are the person who's inking your own work, then it's just a note to yourself, like, that you want it to be black. Whereas if you were passing your inks off to someone else, then you could use that, or you would shade them in with pencil. But for these studies, I knew that it was going to be inked over completely, so I just went ahead and used X's. Some struggle points that I had with this one is putting together the perspective, and that's one of the things that I definitely learned, is that when you have a scene that needs the perspective, then you really need to figure out that perspective before just going in first. So this middle scene here, that was done pretty easily. The perspective, I kind of guessed at it, but I think that it worked. The other thing I struggled with was that very first panel. I actually saved that panel for last because the way they portrayed a car and a fire hydrant at night, I think they did it skillfully, but I didn't necessarily understand how to get those shapes, those shadow shapes, to make sense. So a lot of fudging on that first panel. Another thing that I learned while I was working on this was that even though there was a lot of black usage, rarely did the lines connect with the black. There almost was always a space between that allowed some breathing room for the artwork. Sometimes the lines would connect to the black shadows, other times it wouldn't. I think that was a great thing to notice, because sometimes when you have everything connecting, even though that's how it works in real life, in art, you kind of need that breathing space. Another thing that I chose to do differently, because in the original artwork there was a lot of blood splatter indication on the ground, on the shade, on the closet door, I guess, and I wasn't able to do that because this was only going to be in black and white at this point. So I chose to use a detailed line to just indicate where I wanted the blood splatter to go. Another difference I chose to make was the hand shadow. Instead of going full black, because I already had so much black there, I just used hatching lines to indicate that that area was in shadow. Overall, this was another image that I really enjoyed recreating in my own way. I learned a lot about how to use shadows to frame a scene and how to do slow reveals of things. I think this was just great storytelling, this 2-page spread. I wanted to do both of them, and I actually, in my book, I have more pages with sticky notes where I could do even more studies, and maybe after I get through all the other books, maybe I will come back and do a few more, but for now I'm really happy with how these came out. So hopefully this is a process you guys can take from, where you recreate original artwork. Give yourself easy mode. It doesn't have to be one for one. It doesn't have to be perfect. What you're trying to learn is just the techniques that were used to compile a page. And it doesn't need to be an entire page. It could be just a panel that you find interesting. It could be the whole page, or it could be a double page spread. Recreating it to the best of your ability kind of gets you thinking in the line of how the artist handled this situation and how you could possibly solve that same problem. That's all for today's video. Hopefully you guys learned something from it, and if you're interested in more studies that I'll be doing, please subscribe, stay tuned. I've got several other books that I'm going to be studying from, as well as more podcasts on the topic of how to make comics. See you next time.